Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Danny Lichtenfeld, director of the Brattleboro Museum. So happy to be here with you this evening for a conversation between two people who I greatly admire as artists and also just generally as human beings, Charlie Hunter and Eric Aho. They're going to talk about art and life and probably trains and whatever else strikes their fancy. And when they're done, they will be happy to take your questions and comments. So I hope you'll stick around for that. We're presenting this event tonight in connection with the exhibit Charlie Hunter Semaphore, which opened at the Brattleboro Museum on June 19th and is on view through October 11th. The exhibit was curated by Eric, and it features a selection of paintings by Charlie of railroad infrastructure. Not trains per se, but signals, semaphores, tracks, stations, bridges, all rendered in Charlie's distinct and wonderful style. So in just a moment, I'm going to ask Charlie and Eric to join me on screen. The plan is that they're going to present for about 45 minutes or so, and then we'll take your questions and comments. To submit a question or comment, if you're here via Zoom, please use the Q&A or the chat button on your screen. Preferably the Q&A button. That's a little easier for me to keep track of and manage. You can do that. You can enter your question at any time, but we're going to save them to the end of the presentation. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you can type your questions or comments there, and we'll keep an eye on that too. Okay. So actually, before I ask Eric, Charlie and Eric to join me, I'm going to ask Kirsten, our events manager, who's here behind the scenes, to share the, we have a virtual tour on our website of Charlie's exhibit. And before we get into a conversation about the work, we thought it would be nice to just provide a quick visual frame of reference for the exhibit. So Kirsten, if you wouldn't mind bringing up that virtual tour, thank you. So if you go find the virtual tour on our website, and later I'll tell you how you can do that. You can actually click and drag yourself around the room and zoom in and stuff. I think the way it's playing right now is just sort of an automated video, but you can go do it yourself and linger and take time and go in whatever order you'd like. So there you have a bit of a visual snapshot of what the exhibit looks like. And so with that out of the way, I'm going to ask Charlie and Eric to come join me now, please. And as they're coming on, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about each of them. Hi, Charlie, and expecting Eric momentarily.
Eric is bailed. He said to hell with it.
Well, we hope Eric is going to unmute himself and turn on his camera any moment now, at least by the time I'm done giving a little bit of background information about Charlie and Eric. So I'll start with Charlie. Charlie Hunter was raised in rural Vermont and graduated with a BA in art from Yale University. He worked as a graphic designer and artist manager in the music industry, creating scores of tour posters for acts such as The Clash, REM, Bob Dylan, the Jerry Garcia Band, and others. He worked for a time as a music manager, which included organizing music trains that ran across the United States, Mexico, and Canada. And Charlie is now a full-time painter based just up the river from Brattleboro in the town of Bellows Falls. Charlie's work has been included in the American Masters show in Manhattan, and he's won top awards at plein air events around the country. He likes to say that his goal is to paint beautifully that which is not traditionally considered beautiful. Charlie, as I read that, I guess I don't actually know if you like to say that, but I guess you've said that at least once before.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair enough
And here's Eric. Perfect timing, just as I'm about to introduce Eric.
My computer just started spitting out crazy things, and like all the
Th-
all the screens were
This
moving.
is shaping up to be a really fun night already.
Yeah, it's
So,
I-
Eric, I was just about to tell the assembled masses a bit about your background. Eric is a painter known for his gestural abstracted paintings that evoke natural forms. His work is informed by his impressions of the landscape and his deep knowledge of art history. Eric earned a BFA from the Massachusetts College of Art, and he completed graduate work on a Fulbright Fellowship at the Lahti Art Institute in Finland. His work has been exhibited at major museums throughout the United States and abroad, and is held in the permanent collections of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, the Hood Museum of Art, among others. Eric lives and works in the tiny southern Vermont town of Saxton's River, not far at all from where Charlie is based in Bellows Falls. Charlie, Eric, so happy you're here. I'm literally happy that you're here right now, Eric. I appreciate
running for
guys.
it's like rushing to make the train, you know.
Yeah.
Just,
Okay.
just got
Perfect.
there.
It's great to see you both. Thank you for being here. I'm going to leave the screen now and let you guys take it away, and let me know when you're ready for Q&A, and then I'll come back on and we'll do that.
All right. Thank you, Danny. Charlie, thanks for being here. Thank you, everyone in the Zoom world, for showing up. And you know, we had hoped to do this in person at the Brattleboro Museum itself, in front of Charlie's wonderful paintings. Of course, the Brattleboro Museum itself is a former train station, and a very apt location to host Charlie's work, Charlie's show and Charlie's work, because there's a feeling of both past, present, past, present, and future unfolding both at the museum and in the gallery where we've hung Charlie's exhibition, Semaphore, right? And, you know, Charlie, a semaphore came to mind because, I mean, I think that paintings themselves signal things. They signal us towards something, towards an idea, towards a place, towards a feeling. And, you know, of course, in your paintings, you also have symbols and shapes and actual pictures of depictions of actual semaphores.
Right. None of which made it into the show.
Right. Well, you know, we can talk about editing in a minute, but you know, on further reflection of the semaphore, the artist in front of the canvas, waving his arms, moving her arms, is in fact making a semaphore. The act is a semaphore of sorts.
That's so good, Eric. That is brilliant.
Well, I don't know about brilliant. I think I'm attacking this on a meta level, and we'll get into some more of that. But I want to start the conversation. I want to find out everything we can possibly find out about how you make these paintings.
Okay.
Right? And what they mean to you, and then we'll hear from others. Maybe they'll tell us what they mean to them. But earlier today we were on, or yesterday was it? The days just blend together. We were on a radio program hosted here in Vermont, a call-in show, which was a lot of fun. And you mentioned something there that had been sort of sitting in the back of my head, but I had yet to really investigate myself, and that's photography. You said that when you, or maybe you meant the viewer, walks into the gallery, they may see these paintings as old photographs from a distance.
Right.
But then something happens in the exchange or the approach, right, towards the painting. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you work with or don't work with or borrow from photographs, and in fact, what that exchange, how it changes for you.
Right. Well, most of the images in this show or I'd say about half the images in this show were from life, either painted on site or painted from sketches and maybe reference photos, but they're really not working directly from the photographs themselves.
All right.
About half the images, on the other hand, are utterly from old photographs. The thing I think is fascinating is that in the realm of representational painting, we always are referencing art that has come before us. This is, a composition that has reference to Hopper. This is a composition that has reference to Giotto, whatever. But why not also use some of those tropes of photography? Because photography is just as much as 21st century animals. Photography is just as much in our brains as painting. Of course, the car alarm has just gone off next door, so that'll add to the. Oh, I stopped. But the idea of why not reach into that rich treasure trove of Dorothea Lange or Walker Evans or Cartier-Bresson, whoever. But we all have those images just as much in our brains. And my dad, being a printer,
Right.
growing up in New Hampshire and Vermont, I loved all the effects that graphic, the printing plates imbued on, not intentionally, but that they imbued on the printed material. And so I take all that into how I make an image as well. So it's really a smorgasbord of two-dimensionality.
What you're talking about there is the, I don't know, a love or an appreciation or an awareness of the incidental, right? Like the thing that happens incidentally on the printing press that reveals a tremendous effect, a magical effect, mysterious effect that you couldn't make yourself.
Correct.
And within all of these works, and they span a little bit of, there's a period of time, and I forget the exact brackets of time where we have in the show, but there's a tremendous activity between intention and incident.
Okay.
The sharp, crisp edge of something, and then the loose, drippy, gooey, smeary stuff.
Right.
And that I'm just wondering, is that something you're speaking about that comes from something like witnessing the activity in the print shop? I mean, is there any holdover?
No, not the gooey stuff. The gooey stuff is just the delicious goodness of the painting process.
Right.
The various effects. I like how, if we think about making an image,
right.
If we think about, we are smearing pigment on a flat surface. If you can introduce kind of if you can introduce elements that imbue it with the passage of time, I think that's fascinating. So I think if you can, it both helps move the eye around to have an undifferentiated area on a painting. It helps direct the eye. But then if you imprint that with certain effects, it brings forth the idea of like old damaged photographic plates. So
right.
You're imposing this artificial verisimilitude that seems to look like.
I have to get my dictionary out. Sorry.
It's art talk. It's art talk, Eric. You would understand that.
I think there should be a radio, and it's been proposed many times by different people, but a radio program called Art Talk, where you describe things in minute detail, and you get to use words like that.
Right.
So I'm glad that you talked about how putting the paint on the canvas, because you have this this incredible contact, a relationship, right? Another art word, but contact with the surface, whether it's a board or canvas or paper, And, you're smearing and you're pushing and you're prodding, but in a way, the paint is very thin, right? So you're also just hovering around the surface of the paper. So the surface that you're working on is incredibly important.
Yes,
It
that's
it continually reveals itself through well, in the painting, some of them are left bare.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's something that really fascinates me, and it probably comes from being the son of a printer.
Right.
Is that I am not someone who loads up the surface with a lot of paint. My brain works in thinking of my light to dark range. That value range is dictated by the thickness of the paint film.
Right.
When I paint from life, when I paint plein air, as they say, I paint essentially monochromatically when I paint from life, because I like the light changes so quickly within 3 hours. You've got to get the story down. And by eliminating having to worry about color, there's also the wonderful mental discipline of really having to think about that value of light to dark. And my value range is dictated by how thick the paint film is. So I work very, very thin. I don't use white pigment generally.
Right.
So my brightest bright is always going to be the substrate itself. And the light to dark value, I use basically transparent or semi-transparent pigments. So light to dark is dictated by how thick is the paint.
Well, that reminds me of a lesson from a fabulous teacher I had named Hetty Siebel, who, and I should heed some of this wisdom that I learned years ago, but she said, you don't have to make a thick painting. You don't have to apply the paint thickly to make the painting feel thick and to feel weighty. And, when in doubt, add more paint, right? So, maybe I'm expressing my own doubt about my work and how I look at the world, but you push around this marvelous diaphanous veil, and you leave it's smoky and murky, and then you cut out sharp edges, all of which is to kind of keep us coming in and moving back. And I mean, there's wonderful action in those paintings. And it also occurred to me, probably around the same time, I was thinking about the semaphore of painting the darn thing. But you're also working with, as far as I can tell, or if I were writing writing a report on this, I'd say that you're using various pigments of iron oxide, and that mixed with oil sounds very rusty. Right? I mean, it sounds like a material metaphor, a material symbol for the rusted infrastructure that you're talking about.
Yes, I would say it is. It was not a conscious thought, but it's a marvelous synchronicity.
But at some point it must have occurred to you, and then it becomes a major tool for expressing what you're doing. I mean, a painter's job is to sort of constantly invent new tools, right? You invent the tools, you use them for a certain purpose, and then, once you figure that out, you reject the tool, or as I see it, you reject the tool and then learn new ones.
Okay.
Right. So anyhow, that strikes me as a significant tool. The
oxides,
the iron oxide, and the oil. Of course, this entire industry you're speaking of, the railroad industry wouldn't exist without oil.
Or iron oxide.
Or iron oxide, exactly.
Yeah.
And a little water and fire and steam, and so it's very elemental
Yes,
on all of these levels. And I mean, that one wall in particular, the left wall as you come into the gallery with that central black circle. It's one of my favorite paintings in the entire show. So I think it's both phenomenally abstract. It's something of a via negativa, right? It's like a way to go. It's a way into some other kind of world. It's a dusk world walking along the tracks. And it's unlike any, yes, that's it right there, solid cold. And it's really unlike anything else in the show, and much unlike anything I've seen you make since. Can you tell us about this a little bit?
Sure. What I have a habit of if I've got extra paint left over from a painting session, I will just smear it onto a canvas.
Okay, so all secrets revealed here, folks. It's
Yep.
yeah.
The paintings are basically all palimpsests. I mean, and this was smeared just leftover paint for about a year. And then I was working on some skies. Now I just said that I don't paint with white pigment. That's when I'm painting from life. This is a studio piece. So I did a lot of overlays with white and then cut in that very sharp across the bottom brown oxide and did a bunch of spattering. And it just kind of sat there for another year or so. Mm-hmm. And then I was doing a series of drawings of the triple target USS Signal next to the Bellows Falls train station, which appears also in another painting in this show called Target. And that signal, I just learned, is about to be taken down in the next year or so. It's one of the few remaining of that type of signal in the US, especially the triple target.
How do you learn these? Sorry to interrupt, Troy. How do you learn that these things are about to be taken down? Are you on a speed dial?
I go to Harlow's. I go to Harlow's for breakfast. And Malcolm, the signal maintainer from New England Central, gets his breakfast at Harlow's too. And he also likes art. And so he knows I'm a painter. And he said, and also Chief McGinnis, the Bellows Falls Police Department, who is also a rail fan, he keeps me up to date on what's happening on the rail fan boards. And both of them have told me that this signal is not long for this world. Wow. So enjoy it now. But the thing I love about it, I mean, as a graphic element, is the resolute verticals and then those intense dark circles that are that's a shape not found in nature except for the full moon, and that's the reverse of a full moon.
You know, I mean, with the telephone and telegraph line behind it, I get the feeling of a Morse code signal, mm-hmm. right? And those, the dots and the vertical dash and the dashes. But
well, and that's really true, because all these images, at least the rail images in this show, the signals and semaphore, which didn't make it into the show, but they're all real analog ways of communication. And the new realm is positive train control, which is all digital. And that is what is the future, you know?
Well, it's fascinating. And it's a marvel that we still have trains running at all. And I think you and I, we agree on many things. And one of them is we'd like to see increased rail service. We'd like to see high-speed rail and more freight being delivered by rail. It really seems to be the best way.
Yeah, and I think we really have turned the corner nationally. I mean, there's a huge amount that's wrong with this country right now, but the argument about whether passenger rail has a place in the national transportation matrix really seems to have been settled. Even the conservative Republicans in Kansas seem to be starting to understand that no means of transportation of human beings absent subsidies can make money. It doesn't make money. Airlines don't make money were it not for airports being paid by the taxpayer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So I think we will be entering an era where there will be more and more passenger rail transport. And you look to Europe for where things are the guiding light of passenger rail. Mm-hmm. And 5 years ago in Europe, there was a very sad trend, which was that the last overnight trains, sleeping car trains, were all being eliminated. And in the last 4 years, with this understanding of climate change, European governments have really shifted, and there's now this explosion of overnight passenger rail. And you look at America, it's insane that there aren't 5 trains a night between New York and Atlanta, between Cleveland and Chicago, between
Albany and
New York
Chicago.
and Cleveland. You know, it's why don't we understand that rather than spending a night at a hotel and getting on an airplane, get on the train, spend the night on the train. Plus, you have the element of beauty that you don't get when you're flying. So,
Well, which leads, well, that is absolutely true. I couldn't agree more. And I just like to, this has me thinking about one of our first, we had known each other for a while, but the first time that we really collaborated on a project where really I piggybacked, to use a railroading term, on your expertise. Charlie, you had been for years and years, you've been organizing Roots on the Rail, a famous program that brings singer-songwriter musicians to historic rail cars. Some of them are sleeper cars, in fact, and you take fabulous journeys across the country and Canada.
correct.
And I've just been enamored of this project for so long. And not being a singer-songwriter myself, we chuckled over dinner at Una's, I think, in Bellows Falls, then Una's, and we came up with the idea of an art train. And boy, was that a memorable trip! A sleeper car out of Montreal, overnight to the into the Laurentian wilderness of northern Quebec, which stopped at a flag stop at the deep in the spruce forest. You and I hopped off along with, were there 20 participants?
No, only like 12 people, but the amount of
Only 12.
the amount of gear we had.
That's what it was. The gear was extraordinary. And we even had this one lady with leather pants and high heels get off the train in the middle of the Canadian wilderness to be met by 2 handsome Quebecois lads who escorted her down to the boat, which took us to the portage across the lake.
Yeah, oh, that was great. It was the Seigneurie du Triton.
That's right.
There was one waitress who spoke English, but
That's
not
right.
too well, because I remember one night she came up and said, "Tonight, dinner is going to be pieces of the wild deers."
That's absolutely right. So many good stories came out of that trip. Do you recall what kind of train that was?
Oh yeah. It was we chartered a 1955. It was built by the Budd Company of Red Lion, Pennsylvania. It was built for the Canadian, which was the great Canadian Pacific Streamliner train. It was a round end bullet dome car, and it has like 4 sleeping compartments in it, and then an under the dome bar, and then a lounge area in the back where we had art discussions as we.
That's right. And we drew from the observation deck the passing landscape.
Exactly. Oh, it was great. I mean, and since then, you know, I started in 2019. We started a thing called Entraîneur, which was
that's just too good.
It was not, that was not my line. That was a guy named Larry Moore who came up with the idea of it. But it's a wonderful idea, which is that we get on in Chicago, go overnight to La Junta, Colorado, get off, paint in La Junta all day, stay at a motel next to the train station in La Junta. The next morning, get on the train again, ride down 1 stop to Trinidad, Colorado, paint for a day in Trinidad. Next day, ride down 1 stop to Las Vegas, New Mexico. You know, it's 5 stops in 5 days using the train as transport. But I'll tell you, we have learned how much gear to carry. We've got it down to one small bag for your personal belongings and one bag of plein air equipment.
Do you have a specific? You have a very specific packing list.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Oh, but boy, it's a great way to see the country.
Well, you know, this gets me to another question that's been on my mind to ask you, and that, you know, your whole story and mine too, in fact, began just, I mean, we grew up a few miles from each other, a dozen or so miles. We didn't know each other. My father was also a railroad man, and while you have tremendous knowledge of the railroad, I just picked up bits and pieces of experience and some jargon and some curse words. But I often, I should say occasionally, rode that rail line probably right past your father's shop, in Nashua and Milford. In fact, one Christmas, my dad had been on strike for his organization within the Brotherhood of Railroad Locomotive Engineers, and we did not have a Christmas tree. So he called up his buddy Arthur Ward, who was running a run down from White River Junction, and it passed through there. And Arthur Ward had one of the trees fall off the top of the truck, the car.
And that's why we didn't have a Christmas tree that year. You heartless man.
Oh no, these trees were destined for Boston and other places.
All right.
It just mysterious. I was 10 years old. It mysteriously rolled off the
Lord
car piled high.
Yeah.
Fabulous. But so your story begins with the New England rail system, right? But you've added stops along the way, as you were just describing, right? So you're painting in these other locations,
right?
And some of them are even flag stops, right? So how do you tell us what it's like for you to move around and what it's like to take your origin story with the railroad and sort of move it around the country, and then how does that shape your sense of or understanding of home and place and all of that, because you're not exactly a hobo.
No, I'm a child of privilege. You know, I've hopped a freight train exactly once, which was in 1979, maybe, from Ludlow, Vermont, up to Mount Holly, and then hopped another freight train back down.
What was that like?
Slightly terrifying, and then it was you felt incredibly cool.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Oh, and fortunately, you know, it does not go. That train didn't go very fast, so and then it came to a halt up in Mount Holly, and so I was able to climb off, and then they took pity on me heading back down, and they actually stopped the train and let me get on. And we're like, "We don't see you."
Oh, so you were discovered.
I was discovered.
Yeah.
But to me, I don't know why it is that I have this affinity with rail as kind of the operative metaphor. I think all of us who paint representationally have basically, when I studied fiction, they used to refer to right objects. Right objects are items that may or may not have literal significance to the storytelling, but appear throughout a story and kind of develop a gravity just because of their appearance. I don't have a familial background in railroads. I fell in love with the aesthetic of them as a child. And they have kind of been the metaphor through which I climb into painting. Because I think for those of us who paint representationally, and probably for those who paint abstractly as well, but obviously if one paints representationally, one uses something from life as the way that one climbs into the necessary work of painting, which is an abstract series of shapes and lights and darks.
Right.
So my paintings are nominally using railroads imagery, but they are an abstract collection of shapes and values. On top of that, though, there is the nominal subject matter. I mean, so you can have Hopper paintings work both as shapes, like Early Sunday Morning. That painting is an amazing collection of abstract shapes, but it also evokes a certain feeling looking at that red brick row house with the curtains at varying heights and the way the lamppost is, the shadow is being cast. So there's it is a mixture of the completely abstract and the literal. And for me, for some reason, I find railroad imagery a well that has at least kept giving for my adulthood so far.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, that, you just evoked beautifully that Hopper painting. Favorite.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
You know, the way he's, I mean, I just want to think about it a little bit more. I mean, the way he set it up, he sets it up so that it's essentially parallel to our lives as we watch it. And because of that sort of, I mean, as if it's seen from a car or a train, we're not sure, right? But it's like we can't fully enter it. It's like you can't hop off the car to get to it. It's just, it's so,
it's a barrier. It's
a barrier itself, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating. But I just love how you describe the detail, and I think this goes to how closely you look at things too. The curtains at various heights, and if we were to look at that painting together, we could look at how each curtain is just has a slight tinge of cigar stain on it, and faded by the sun and dust from the passing trains and cars.
Well, again, but nominally. I mean,
nominally.
In another way, it is, if you're just thinking about the pigment, it's just varying the pigment slightly enough so it is not boring. I mean, it's interesting. It's like a vernacular Mondrian in that it's a grid painting.
Right.
But whereas Mondrian was using pure color and defining it with those black lines in between, Hopper is it's all nuance and off notes and stuff.
You're so right to say that it just so it's not boring, right? Yeah. And George Nick, you may be familiar with George Nick, another painter of trains and cars and planes and automobiles, anything shiny, really.
George Nick. How do you spell that?
Nick.
Oh, okay.
George. But he said in the end, it just has to look good. That's, I mean, you can labor as long as you want, or you can dash it off as quickly as you like, but it just has to look good. And it just has to look good to you, right?
Right. Now this is another Hopper.
Oh, here we go.
What is this one called, Danny? Put that title back up there. It's not House by
I can't recall the title of it.
But this is
Railroad Sunset.
Railroad Sunset. This is a device that Hopper uses a lot, which is that barrier.
Right.
The only thing that is strange in this one is that the signal tower is on this side of the railroad tracks. Right. Normally, Hopper puts the railroad tracks or the barrier across, and then the item behind it.
There's that fabulous looming Victorian house behind, just on the other side of the berm of
House by a Railroad. That painting has been, well, Hopper has been a big lodestar for me.
Well, I wondered about that, and of course, the question that I think everyone wants to know this, like who are the artists that excite you, and what are the paintings that you just like to look at? You mentioned Giotto. I mean, I think that is super cool.
Well,
and he was not a great advocate of the railroad.
He didn't know any better. He would have been. Um, all of them, Eric, all of them.
All of
It's
them.
all, I mean, there's, you know, I got asked on some podcast who my, you know, what artwork I would like to own. And I
Oh,
said,
boy.
one of the Zhao Bing Phoenix series, because I've been down to Mass MoCA. Zhao Bing is the guy who creates these 200-foot long phoenixes out of
Oh,
construction trash from Beijing.
right.
It's amazing art, you know. And just looking at that, I'm transported. And one of the things I love about art, one of the things Richard Schmid used to say, Richard Schmid was an American realist, very literal, had no room for abstraction or conceptual art or anything, but was a huge mentor to me. But what he used to say is that the reason that painting is important is that it cuts through the loneliness of existence and you get to see what life feels like to somebody else. And
That's beautifully put.
one of the things I love about art is that there's all this stuff. I'll never be able to paint the way you paint. I'll never be able to do the constructions the way Zhao Bing does constructions. And I don't have to. All I have to do is do my work. And that's what life looks like to me. I get to see what life looks like to you. I get to see Zhao Bing. You get to see Hopper. One of the things I love about Hopper is that Hopper was not a facile painter. You look at Hopper struggled. You know, he wasn't very good at a bunch of things.
Right.
And
And he avoided many of them. And when he couldn't, he fudged it.
Yes. Yeah, some of the there's I guess the famous example is one of the nude women, or the woman standing in front of the bed, and you look at the bed and it's about 4 foot by 4 foot square.
Right.
But that's fine. It still is a great painting, you know.
And she looks to be made of semi-dry spackle.
Yeah, no, he was not a natural painter of the human form.
No, but he was a brilliant arranger, right? He understood how an arrangement of shapes of whatever surface quality they might have understood that visual impact, that visual emotional impact.
Yeah, I would agree.
Very,
I mean,
very, very exciting. You know,
one
the
of
way
my
we're
favorite
talking about it, you know, about honesty and getting to the self. You know, one of the teachers most important to me, Henry Isaacs, him's a figurative painter who turned to the landscape and just and really taught me how to just let all of the let your worldly concerns go and just look. And just looking might mean you know, drawing something with great precision, but just looking might also mean putting a swirl of beautiful periwinkle blue down over a certain other color. You know, so in the end, you just have to do it your own way.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the metaphors that I use when I teach is that visual artists are storytellers, and you just find the language that is most truthful and conveys what you want to convey. And you don't worry about using somebody else's language. I mean, one of the things, you know, I look at conceptual art and I don't get it. Then I'll read something about a piece of conceptual art where it explains how to look at it, and I can be reduced to tears. There is a piece of conceptual art I recently saw that it's a pile, it's 175 pounds of candy in the corner of a room. That's it. So that's stupid. Then you read what it's about. And it was this guy's lover in the 1980s. who got AIDS, and he loved candy. And it was before there was any cure,
Mhm.
and he wasted it away and he died. So the painting is the piece
It's a
is
portrait.
called something like Memorial to George,
Right.
or George, whatever the guy's name is. And the instruction is, if you look at the piece, you are to take one of the pieces of candy. So all of a sudden, it is about Christ,
Right. Right.
taking my body.
Right.
It is about a horrible situation of medical neglect in the 1980s and American policy that delegitimized an entire segment of the population. I mean, it's a huge piece of art when you understand what it is. Even though if you just look at it, you say, oh, that's stupid. And I assume that for people who love just say conceptual art, looking at the stuff that I like to paint, they probably say, well, that's stupid. But, part of what I'm processing in my work is the deindustrialization of the Northeast,
Right.
the passage of time, the marginalization of rural communities as we move toward urbanization. It's art is just such a broad a smorgasbord of so many wonderful tastes and touches and stuff.
And here we are talking about it necessarily because, as a friend of mine tells me repeatedly, all complex systems require explanation. And painting, of course, you can take it in on whatever level you wish and bring to it, but it's a complex system, like so many, like all the systems you just described that you're grappling with, and it warrants a little bit of explanation. And I guess in a way that's the curator's job,
Mhm.
not to, but of course, not to over-explain. So maybe we can leave it at that.
Well, one of the things I would like to say that I am grateful to you for is when you hung this show, you edited it down. Because I mean, you came to the studio several times, you looked at previous work. I painted for the show. You kept a couple of pieces from that. The other pieces that didn't make the show are now at Will Basick's gallery down in Northampton, Mass.
Including the title piece, Semaphore.
Including the title piece, Semaphore, and Cantilever Signal, and many others. But you really kept paring that show down, because we even had sketches. You had sketches of how you wanted to lay it out. And then when it came time to hang it, you even cut out like 3 more pieces. So I want to ask, is that something when you curate a show, do you tend to always pare down, or do you sometimes say, well, it needs 2 pieces more?
Well, I think this is the 3rd show or 4th show I've ever curated. The other shows were hung salon style. I included as much as possible, but those were group shows.
Okay.
And I kept finding more artists I wanted to add. So, I mean, if it wasn't going to be a 3-person show, it might as well be a 30-person show.
Right.
But in the case, but hanging your work was both a privilege and a tremendous, a challenge, right? And a task that I'd never encountered before, which was first and foremost to accept the responsibility of presenting your great work, so it can be taken in and enjoyed and understood, maybe. And then, but the process was a lot like making a painting, frankly. I mean, you kind of move things around, and then you go, well, that's not necessary, and you take it away. It's not an afterthought so much as it's part of an instinct, right? And I don't want to oversimplify it or draw too many parallels to that, but it did feel a bit like that. And
that makes sense. I mean, it basically is. You are creating a you're creating a work out of a bunch of components, you
Right.
know? And most of painting is getting rid of extraneous shit, you know, or at least not most of painting, but a lot of painting is getting rid of extraneous shit. Or as Miles Davis said,
As Miles Davis said,
you don't play the notes that are, don't play the notes that are there, play the notes that aren't there.
that's right. Charlie, maybe we should, maybe Danny has some questions for you.
Okay.
Danny, you're still
Hi,
there.
guys. I mean, I'm just like totally wrapped with attention here, and I think our audience is too. Somebody just typed a comment into the chat saying this is a fascinating discussion, and I couldn't agree more. So thank you. I kind of just want to go back away and let you continue, but actually, I will pass along a few comments and questions that have come in so far. You've also stirred up a couple questions that I have myself that I want to ask about. And I guess I'll use this time to invite everyone who's out there watching, please, to now would be a great time to type your questions and comments in as well, and we'll get to those. So on this topic you were just touching on about the curating this show for the museum, Eric, it was interesting to me to hear how your take on that. Charlie shows up, and in an adjacent room is another exhibit that we have up that was also curated by an artist, one of the artists who's a group show curated by an artist who's in the show, John Newsom. And he's very, he doesn't really feel comfortable even calling himself a curator. He likes to say that he organizes group shows when he does something like this. But he made the same point about how he feels like it's not entirely different than what he does in his studio and the kinds of choices and decisions he makes in the studio, what he's doing when he's hanging a work or curating a show. A different kind of mark making, but thinking about the moves and the placement as a kind of mark making.
Right.
So it was interesting to me to hear you say that. Charlie, I'm curious to know from you, and I swear to you that I'm not like fishing for anything. You have had a career to date as an artist that I think a lot of other artists I know would wish that there are elements of your career that a lot of other artists I know wish they enjoyed in their careers. You have a huge following around the country. It often seems like you can't produce work fast enough to keep up with all the people who want to collect your work. And yet your career, correct me if I'm wrong, has largely unfolded outside of this like museum / academic realm.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, now having this was your first museum show, I think, first solo museum show. I'm curious if you have any perceptions or insights or thoughts about this world and what this experience has been like, and being an artist who has previously operated primarily outside that world and now having this bit of an experience inside that world. If you have any thoughts along those lines.
Well, it's a really interesting. It's an interesting question and situation. As best I can, and of course, I just am living my life. I just wake up every morning and do what I do and have ended up having this path that I'm on. But all I wanted to do was to paint. And how do I get to do that? And the doors that opened up to me were basically a very kind of small businessman kind of world. I did not have any desire to teach. I don't even quite understand how the normal academic painter life works. All I know is my dad was a self-employed printer. So basically I became a self-employed painter. And the way you become a self-employed painter is you paint and yeah, I found out about the plein air circuit, and I went on the plein air circuit. And the plein air circuit, ladies and gentlemen, is entirely divorced from the academic painting world. It's a bunch of former illustrators, a bunch of former graphic designers. It's very literal. It's not terribly politically liberal. It's not, it's politically liberal, but there are some right wingers in that world. It's not, let us say, adventurous in its approaches to painting. There are a few people they're getting to be more who are somewhat adventurous, but it's the world that was available to me. And what I've tried to do is paint honestly and try to not keep doing the same thing within that world, in hopes that the larger art world will say, oh, that's pretty good at some point. But I just really haven't troubled myself with trying to climb the ladder that I don't know how to climb. I've climbed the ladder I know, you know. And to try to fit in having been a music manager was very, very helpful to me for that, because what I managed was singer-songwriters, which were never the flavor of the month. They were never the hip kids. You know, they were not Guided by Voices. They were not Nirvana. They were not Sarah McLachlan. Well, Sarah McLachlan was about as hip as you could get kind of within that world. But they were their genre, they were the same as genre artists. And if my role is to be a genre artist, I'll be, to quote Martin Luther King, if you're to be a street sweeper, let the heavens look down upon you and say, there was a street sweeper. You know, do the best you can with what you got.
Right.
Thank you for sharing that, Charlie. It's really interesting to hear you explain that trajectory, and it's no surprise to me that it is rooted in just like an honest commitment to developing your voice and being able to paint, because I have felt that your work exudes that approach. And of course, there's a lot of work that doesn't. You know, I imagine there are a lot of artists on the plein air circuit and other circuits, and also who are, you know, acclaimed and well established within the art world, whose work is maybe a little bit too influenced by the trappings of whatever world they're and the needs and carrots of whatever world they're operating within. But I've just had this feeling about your work, and I'm sure Eric has too, and people that I've spoken with, that boy, it's like, there's one thing about Charlie's work. It just is a real honest, singular, individual voice that comes through. And it happens to be a voice and an aesthetic that I personally love, which is also nice for me.
But I'm just lucky. I'm very lucky that I get to do what I do, and to try to. When I was a music manager, when I was managing Dar Williams, we used to argue about whether she should try to have a hit single or not. And I was, don't try to have a hit single, because you want your records to be being played in 30 years. Right. You don't want your records to be at the top of the charts now and dated. You know, you don't want to be Men Without Hats. I love Men Without Hats, but you know, it's hard to be Men Without Hats now. He has to keep doing the safety dance, even though he does very, very good music now. But if you are true to what you do, you know, hopefully it gets noticed. If it doesn't, there's a lot of unfairness in the world that's a lot worse than that.
Charlie, you just opened the can of a great future conversation, I think, between.
You love Men Without Hats too?
I do. In fact, we just introduced it to the kids recently. They were like, "What is this? You listen to that?" So
I'm just gonna, I don't want to dwell too much on this, what's it called? On the siding that we just pulled onto.
exactly.
But I don't think Safety Dance was Men Without Hats.
Yes, it was.
It was?
I'll bet you
All right.
$100,000.
Okay.
Ooh,
All right.
you
No,
are-
I mean,
you
no, I
are-
won't bet you.
No.
All right.
You are a painter, as a gambling painter. There you are.
So there's a lovely comment and question here from Arvid Johnson, who writes, I looked forward to Charlie's exhibit and wanted to view in person, but COVID is still alive and well. So I'm here in Colorado, down the road from Aspen, where I live on a horse ranch with a beautiful wife and 2 great yellow labs as companions. I'm also a proud owner of one of your works, Charlie, and 2 of Eric's. I'm a train nut and a painter after my career in law.
Arvid
small
Johnson, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Arvid.
He says it's a small world. My question, have you ever painted Western subjects, horses, cowboys, etc., which would lend themselves to your monochromatic look?
And the answer is, you bet. I participate every year in the Buffalo Bill Art Show and Sale in Cody, Wyoming. In Cody, Wyoming, ladies and gentlemen, you don't get any more Western than that. I'll tell you, out there, I went to, at the place where the Buffalo Bill Art Show and Sale takes place. On the doors, you enter the Buffalo Bill Center for the West, and there's a sign on the door that says, it says, visible firearms must be checked at the desk.
Ooh, no.
So concealed carry is okay. But I mean, that's Wyoming for you. But the thing I like about Wyoming is that they've got signs they're very, very friendly people. They've got signs all over the place that say, welcome Hunter. And I always just feel like at home there. But no, I do paint a lot of Western stuff.
So do you paint it, hang it on the wall, and then sell it wet?
No, not at Buffalo Bill Art Show and Sale. That's studio stuff.
Oh, I see. Set those up. All right.
But no, I show in Santa Fe, I show in Bozeman, Montana, and I show sometimes in Cody, Wyoming.
Right.
Diane Hallstrom chimed in to say he painted a Hereford in 2010 with an emoji, which I'm interpreting to mean that Diane has some special connection to that painting.
Is that still
But-
livestock?
What?
Still livestock?
Oh, dad joke. That is such a dad joke.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I'm getting to that point.
Yeah, no, I did a series around 2010. I did a series of cows. I figured cows were a good annuity, so I did a Guernsey, a Holstein, a Hereford, and a Jersey. The Holstein looks a little demonic, but the others are pretty good.
As you guys know, the building I'm in, the Brattleboro Museum, was a train station. So it makes, one more nice little layer, related to this exhibit. But as you probably know, the building across the street from here was the headquarters, the worldwide headquarters of the Holstein USA Association. And I'm told that for a time, a long period of time, one of the functions that was served there was they kept a record, essentially like a card catalog, of every single registered Holstein in the world. And there were legions of, from what I understand, mostly women whose jobs were to draw by hand on those cards the distinctive patterns of each Holstein.
Ooh, that's a must see.
Yeah.
Could you imagine?
And a future exhibition.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And of course, that whole complex that used to be filled with dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of employees there, became a white elephant when all those cards were scanned and put on a fraction of a single thumb drive.
Right.
Do you know what happened to the actual cards?
I don't know, but maybe I'll
Maybe we'll
ask an intern to look into
Maybe we'll
that.
find out. Well, the first whole
Um,
scene in Vermont, anecdotally, as I've learned, it was born in Putney, Vermont.
Is that right?
Right.
Another claim to fame for Putney.
I don't know the date, 1830s or early 40s or something like that.
So a question from James Roth that he typed in when we were talking about the plein air circuit. James is asking, so plein air is more the world of the craftsman rather than the academic?
I think that I wouldn't use craftsman as the term. It's a weird little subset of art. But it's a very definite skill.
Strikes me like a convention.
No, that's the plein air convention. That's
That's
different.
the plein air. Okay.
The
All right.
plein air circuit it's basically you're a consignment. It's a consignment show for arts organizations. There are maybe 300 of these events around the country, predominantly in the West, but more or less everywhere, not in the Northeast very much. But what they are is usually about between 30 and 50 artists are invited or juried in. They're put up for a week in guest houses or guest bedrooms of supporters of the arts. You paint all week long, and then there's a gala, and they liquor up their big donors, and hopefully the big donors buy paintings, and they're usually prizes that go along with it. And I would say there are about 200 of us who are the top. There are probably 1,000 people who do this professionally, but there are about 200 who are kind of the top tier. And it's just one particular little skill set. I'm not saying there's any, it's any big deal that that's the tier that I'm been lucky enough to be on. The challenge is that when you are painting from life, the light changes every 3 hours. So basically, either you do 2 paintings a day, you do a morning painting and an afternoon painting, or some people who do the larger works or more detailed works will go to the same site multiple days in a row and paint. But it is a definite skill, because I know some very good studio painters who go out and try to paint from life and are just flummoxed. So it's not without its skill, but I will say there are the dominant style in the plein air world is very conventional. But it is still, there are mad skills involved in it. So I'm one of the bad boys of plein air because I paint monochromatically. And that shows you just how radical a world that is. But there are people. There's a guy named Neil Hughes who lives in New Jersey. He can paint in 3 hours what would daunt a mere mortal. Tim Kelly, a UPS driver in Baltimore, Maryland, amazing painter in that world. You don't go to Tim Kelly to say, I want a new interpretation of how do I think about a picture of a street scene. But if you want a street scene painted better than, certainly better than I could do, you go to Tim Kelly. It's a neat world, and it's very, very nice people. So
that's fascinating.
Thank you. We're okay taking a few more questions and comments. Great. James also wrote, Charlie's subject matter and style seem to me to represent things that are, quote, imperfect, modest, humble, and things not considered traditionally beautiful. There's a Japanese aesthetic called wabi-sabi. Any comment from either of you on this?
I learned the term recently, and I think it's neat, but that's the extent. I mean, Eric, what do you know about wabi-sabi?
All those terms in quotes or out of quotes apply. And wabi-sabi is a new term for me. But I will.
I think so. My understanding, which could be is surely inadequate, is that wabi sabi has to do with the acceptance of imperfection or things that are going to fade away or degrade over time.
Well, that is lovely, and certainly applies to that rich area between progress and nostalgia, which I wanted to talk to you some more about nostalgia, but another time, because but Charlie's work plumbs this area in between where things are imperfect and changeable.
Well, I do think, as a human being, the idea of acceptance of things fading away has been one of the real kind of life lessons I've had to really learn. When I was a kid, we had in Milford, New Hampshire, we had this great farmhouse that had been built in 1816 and had these wonderful barns where you could injure yourself in unbelievable ways. And it got taken, the barns got taken by the Route 101 bypass around Milford, New Hampshire. And I was so angry about that as a kid into my adulthood. I used to be kind of a jerk. I remember yelling at perfectly innocent people about I just was so angry about having that taken away. And now that I live in Bellows Falls, we've got these paper mills that they're doomed. They're doomed. The roofs are falling in and they are going to go away at some point. And I am no longer nearly as grief-stricken about that as I used to be. It's now just
you are their record keeper.
Yes.
I mean, you have made paintings of the Robertson Paper Factory, and even the Arch Bridge in the show. One of the grand paintings in the show is a monument itself to that great monument.
Right, and that got blown up when I was in college and was one of the things I used to get angry about. But yeah, I mean, yes, that is my service, is documenting this stuff. And that's one of the great things about doing these plein air events around the country is you go to Cumberland, Maryland and get to see the stuff that is meaningful to people there that is going away. Apalachicola, Florida, one of my favorite places to paint. That was an oystering town. There, the oyster industry has been destroyed by the fact that Metro Atlanta is growing so fast. The Chattahoochee River is being diverted for Atlanta's water. So the flood of fresh water into the Apalachicola Bay has been cut way back. So there's no oystering anymore. So yeah, we're depicting that when we go down there and paint there. Yeah. Wabi sabi. It's all wabi sabi, man.
Charlie, you'll have to talk to Eric on another occasion about this concept that came up during Scott Lotus's talk last week, preemptive nostalgia.
Now, that was so much fun. Scott Lotus is so smart, man. He talked about the role of railroad in American art. It was such a good overall view. Preemptive nostalgia was basically the idea of recording and depicting stuff before it goes away, right?
Exactly. Okay, so the crowd here has really gotten warmed up. So I have a lot of comments and a few questions to pass along here.
I thought you were going to say the crowd is left.
I'm just going to go in willy-nilly order here. Diane writes, Charlie's paintings are full of history, truth, heart, storytelling, and imaginings. They cut to the core of the images and leave all the fluff and BS to the side. Thank you, Diane.
There you have it.
Angela writes, I have a 2 foot by 3 foot print of early Sunday morning. Oh, this is when we were talking about Hopper. In my kitchen, hanging over my kitchen table. It's wonderful to hear you both discuss it. Edward writes, I consider Charlie a two-toned painter, rust and dust.
I'm writing that down.
Charlie, you have a lot of good exhibition titles that have come out of these talks. Preemptive Nostalgia, Rust and Dust.
Yeah.
You have to. Kat writes, there's a wonderful children's book called Wabi Sabi by Mark Reibstein with the most beautiful collaged art by Ed Young. Thank you, Kat. Kat's an artist who's recently moved to our neck of the woods, just moved to Putney. Diane writes, in response to the painting you were just talking about, Eric, the Arch Bridge Bellows Falls painting is amazing. I agree. Our visitors have really responded to that painting, loved it. Jamie writes, as an alum of Charlie's rail trips, it's wonderful to hear him talk about this aspect of his life. Thank you. That's Jamie Barth.
Oh, hi, Jamie. Jamie's part of the, she's a Boston, she was on the board of Passine, the old Club 47 in Boston.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, know it well.
Yeah, she's one of the good ones. Thank you, Jamie, for all your work. So.
Helen writes, hi from Canada. Question for Charlie. Plein air historically began as a love of painting outdoors. Most historic plein air painters would have been mortified to show their field sketches. When did this activity turn into an Olympic spectator sport? The award money is now sought after, and we know the rest. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Thank you. And Eric, having such knowledge of art history, especially around painting, you may also like to weigh in on this.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
my understanding is that that people have always painted outside. Of course, the Impressionists, a lot of them painted outside. In the 1930s in California, 20s and 30s, there were the California Impressionists who predominantly painted outdoors. I don't really know when the current plein air circuit really started. I believe the first plein air event was Laguna Plein Air, which is an outgrowth of the California Impressionists. I think it sounds a lot grosser than it actually is. It isn't really, it's really a wonderful witnessing for whatever town you're painting in. The competitive aspect isn't really, people aren't generally competing with one another. We're all just trying to paint well. At the my favorite plein air event is Forgotten Coast in Apalachicola, Florida. There's exactly one prize, and that is the artists vote on who what fellow artists they think did the best body of work. You know, so it's not a we're going to just paint stuff and try to win prizes sort of thing. It's a lot softer and more lovely than that.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, plein air painting to me, I think might even mean something different than what it means to Charlie. But you know, and of course, I mean, let's not confuse plein air painting with painting from observation. Plein air painting is painting from observation outdoors among the elements. You know, whether it's a nice sunny day or, you know, snow or, you know, battering rain or what have you, it's about getting outdoors. And that didn't happen until the invention of the lead soldered paint tube in France. And then the, you know, painters could just, you know, I guess painters made their paint portable by putting it into sheep's bladders before that. But with the tube, they could have an array of modern colors and take them out into the, into the city streets, as the so-called Impressionists did.
And in fact, I began my own work in Vermont exactly like that. And I now go back and forth between working outdoors and having given it up for 10 years, I now go back and forth between working outdoors and working in the studio.
With sheep bladders, or are you using
Well, I should say I don't know what kind of bladders they are, but they were called bladders. So maybe they must have been made from some animal, and I'm presuming it would be sheep. But someone out there in this erudite audience will know all the details. So
well, I will say the I think it was Stuart Shills judged some plein air painting event, and at the talk he was asked any advice for student painters, and he said avoid the plein air world. So I think, you know,
it's there's a new fad among young newly minted MFAs to sort of dig into the plein air painting experience. So, you know, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they're not painting in Cody, Wyoming.
Where are they painting?
I don't know, along the Gowanus Canal, I think.
Okay, yeah, probably the Gowanus Canal.
All right, so we have one more question, kind of a big one. It's from Joanne, who asks, Charlie, would you reiterate the observation you made about the importance of painting?
I don't remember what it was. I already made it. Why should I make it again, Joanne?
This program has been recorded.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was just.
It was probably the Schmidt. It was probably the Schmidt quote. That the reason art is important is that it cuts through the inherent loneliness of existence and lets you know what the world feels like to someone else.
Beautiful.
That's probably what it was.
Beautifully put.
And that was Richard Schmid, SCHMID, for people who are interested in looking him up and learning more about him. Well, you guys, this has been absolutely fascinating. I personally, you know, would be happy to just keep going and going, but I don't know, the conventions of how we do these things suggest that we should probably wrap it up about now. So thank you both again. This was just wonderful. James is writing great discussion. Thank you. And others have also said as much here in the comments. And thank you all of you who participated in the Q&A. Before we actually sign off, I just want to let everyone know that, yes, a recording of this talk tonight will be available on the museum's website within the next day or two. So that's brattleboromuseum.org, where you'll find that, as well as recordings of dozens of other events we've presented online over the past 18 months, including that really terrific presentation we hosted last week with Scott Lotus, the director of the Center for Railroad Photography and Art, which was also, you know, related to Charlie's exhibit. So you can find those recordings. You go to our website, brattleboromuseum.org, and then under Events and Video Archive, and that's where you'll find those. Please feel free to share them with people you think might be interested. And if you're actually here in Southern Vermont, or can be here, please come to the museum to see Charlie's artwork in person. We're open Wednesday through Sunday, 10 to 4. Masks are required again, but we all know how to do that and can handle that. And there's plenty of room here for social distancing. So we'd love to see you here in person. And if you can't make it here in person, but you really want to take a good look at the exhibit, next best thing would be to go to our website, brattleboromuseum.org, and you can take a virtual tour for yourself around the exhibit, similar to what we were showing at the very beginning of the event. So you find the page on our website with the info about Charlie's exhibit, and it'll be really obvious there. There's a link to the virtual tour, and you can move yourself around the gallery and zoom in on all the paintings and read Eric's writing about the work and Charlie's writing about the work, and hear some recordings of Charlie speaking about the work. It's really a great little presentation. Last thing I would like to say is that if you enjoyed this event tonight, and would care to make a donation to the Brattleboro Museum to support this type of free programming, we would be very grateful for that. In fact, we really rely on that to be able to do this sort of thing. And any amount makes it is wonderful and makes a big difference for us. So no amount is too small. So thank you for considering that. That's also something you can do at our website, brattleboromuseum.org. I think that's all that I have left. Charlie, Eric, any final thoughts?
Well, I just want to say how grateful I am both to Eric for curating and for having been such an inspiration to me over the last 15 years that I've known you, Eric, and to Danny and the whole team, Mara, and just all the support staff at the Brattleboro Museum. The Brattleboro Museum, the more I've worked with the Brattleboro Museum, the more I am understanding what a treasure it is for our area, what an extraordinary museum it is for any community, even 10 times the size of Brattleboro. So you guys do a great job as well. So thank you.
Absolutely.
That
Thank
means a lot to me. Thank you.
Absolutely. Danny, thank you for this opportunity. And Charlie, thank you for the opportunity to work with you. It's been a real privilege.
All right.
All right.
Okay, well, stay safe, everyone. Take good care of yourselves. Be kind to each other. Hope to see you all in person soon.
We'll look forward
Good
to
night.
it. Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.